Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of our podcast Mother versus the World. My name is Mayank and I'm your host for this episode. This podcast will be in Hindi and English both, depending on the guest we have on our show. So let me get straight to the why behind starting Viraa Care and this podcast. 3.5 years back, we became parents. I became a father here in the Netherlands. It was the COVID time, and we were thinking we're gonna have a little difficult time because once we have our baby in our hands, we will not be having our parents here because of the COVID restrictions. So we thought it's going to be really tough for us, especially during the first few months. But of course, we had our friends here who helped us a lot, but they were also not parents at that time. So, helping with things like breastfeeding, child nutrition or mother nutrition, starting solids for your child when, he turns 6 months. So this was all out of equation. And of course, we were getting, free advice from all over. So family, extended family, social media, and, anyone just passing by would give us an advice. So this advice comforts you. Sometimes it makes you anxious, and more often than not, it makes you worry. And that's why we decided, okay, let's go to our pediatrician. Of course, we had a million questions for him, and we went there. And he had questions like, is my son having enough milk? Is he growing fine? Is everything inside him working fine? And to all our questions, of course, the doctor comforted us. But to all our questions, he said, I don't know. I said, what? You don't know? Then who will tell us? He guided the doctor, the pediatrician here in the Netherlands, guided us to a very special clinic, which is very unique to the healthcare system here in the Netherlands. So this is called Child Growth Consultation Bureau. So this consultation clinic has all the experts like lactation experts, lactation consultants, feeding therapists, and they do a lot of parenting education, which is very important, and which came very handy to us during the first few months of becoming parents. So whenever we would have a question, we would just send an email to him, or book an appointment with them and go there for an appointment. It will be normally a 30 minutes to a 1 hour appointment, where they would clear all our doubts, answer all our questions. This experience of ours gave birth to Viraa, and also this podcast. So this podcast is for helping parents worldwide in countries which do not have a system like us, which is most of the countries. Most of the countries, they depend on doctors, and doctors are different from specialists. And usually the doctors don't have enough time also for you, for parents. Average appointment with a pediatrician in India is 15 minutes, and that's not enough for a new parent. So, this is a podcast that we started for connecting all the mothers, all the parents around the world who could take help from such specialists. And one such specialist is our first guest tonight. Kelly is a renowned pediatric feeding therapist in Virginia, USA. She has over 27 years of experience working with hospitals, doctors, parents, and schools. Trust me, when it comes to feeding for our little ones, whatever she says, it's gold. So let's welcome our first guest, Kelly Benson. Hi, Kelly. How you doing?
Hi, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, in your introduction, I told our viewers that you have 27 years of experience as a pediatric feeding therapist in US. So, why did you take up such a project like Viraa for parenting education? Do you think there is a gap in the healthcare system that we have right now, or it was something from your experience which you felt?
Well, I mean, there are 37 million kids under the age of 5 who are obese in the US. So that's astounding. I mean, these are kids. These are our future leaders. These are our leaders. So just thinking about that number, yes, there is a gap, and
Yeah.
there's a huge gap that I think we have to identify and fill so that we don't have this problem. And I think the gap really starts from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when Sonal told me that she wants to start Veera, I did my research for India, and the numbers aren't also very pretty there. In fact, they're the opposite of pretty. So, the National Family Health Survey from the Indian government says, of course, for breastfeeding, only 55% of women in India are able to exclusively breastfeed. And we are talking about 25 million mothers every year, new mothers every year. And then out of these 25 million babies born every year, only 12.8% of kids in India between the age of 6 months to 24 months, so 6 months to 2 years, they get adequate diet. And
Mhm.
these numbers are for cities, not even for the rural areas. For cities, children are not getting enough good food. Why is that? I mean, why are the numbers so bad, and why can't the doctors help?
I think, yeah, I mean, those numbers, they're astonishing, and it's sad, and this is something that shouldn't be. I think some of the gap comes, like I said, really early on in the process. Um, we have our pregnancy, we're anticipating this new baby, everyone's excited. We go to the hospital, we have great care from the physicians and the
Yeah,
nurses and specialists in the hospital. And then, and we know that our pediatricians are there for the medical care for when we're discharged, but
yeah,
we get discharged from the hospital and go home with this bundle of joy. And then it's like, where's the support? What do we do? Like, this is a big step, but we don't have a manual, right? There are
correct.
no manuals for raising babies. Well, a 1, 2, 3 step manual, so to speak.
Yeah.
We'll get into some of this stuff later, but
I wish they had a manual.
right, but yet it wouldn't be adequate for everybody. So it might be things, maybe some people are trying to do that, maybe on social media, but we can talk about that later. Um, and so there are so many things going on. There are so many adjustments with a
Yeah,
new baby, just from the family dynamics, from routines, learning the baby's cues. We're all in usually a somewhat of a sleep deprived state. And yet, these early days and the first days of being home with the baby and the nutrition are some of the most important days, right?
absolutely.
It's what gets us started, gets us started on the right foot. Good nutrition, sleep, it's the beginning of everything. So it's really crucial. It's a really crucial time. And it's really unfortunate that so many people don't have support during those first days and don't feel prepared.
Correct. But how are the doctors not a part of this solution? I mean, the doctors are there, the pediatricians are there. I said in the introduction that in India there's a huge pressure on doctors because there are less doctors and more people. And the average appointment time with a pediatrician is 15 to 20 minutes for a parent, which is, of course, not enough. But is there a difference between the training of a doctor and a specialist like
Yeah,
yourself?
and to your point about India, I think it's the same here in the US as far as
Oh,
the doctors, you don't get a lot of time, one-on-one time with the doctor. They have lots of appointments during the day.
hmm,
And so I think really, the physicians in their training, I mean, I've heard a lot of them say that they may get um, a class or a lecture on nutrition,
hmm,
or they may have a little short section about feeding, but they're responsible for so many things, the overall health of babies and
correct.
kids, and there's a lot to deal with. They don't specialize in any of those areas, lactation, nutrition, or feeding. And so that's really where specialists like myself and Sonal come in, who have specialized training in those areas. And
Yeah.
that's where our love and our passion lies. And because that's what we're doing every day. So we really can take the time and have that one-on-one specialized care with patients and with families, and to provide that specific type of education.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think it's on purpose that the doctors don't do it. I think, maybe in some cases too, they just assume in some cases that the families are connected with specialists.
Mhm.
So they really don't delve into that area specifically. Maybe they're assuming that they have support, and they really don't.
Correct. So I think that brings me to a point that it's very important as a parent to be prepared before you become one, right? I mean, to be educated about it, because in all walks of a life we prepare. I mean, even if you're going to a college, if you're getting married or some any, I mean, every point of our life we do some kind of preparation. But yet when it comes to parenting, we want to do a lot of preparation. In the end, we are also very dependent on our families for the support and education we need for parenting, because that's obvious, right? You go to your parent for more parenting information, that how did you do. So for example, like you mentioned, that when a child is born, when you delivered and you leave that hospital premises, then it's just you and the baby. And at that time, I think in India, 99% of people depend on their mothers or mothers-in-laws
Oh,
for advice relating to breastfeeding, starting solids for the little one, and mother nutrition, child nutrition, everything. I think for the first year, your mother or your mother-in-law is your go-to person usually. And of course, now things are changing. People, doctors are also more involved now. They're also giving better advice. But still, I mean, for continuous advice, it's mothers or mothers-in-law. But that also is a point, it's also food for thought, that where did our mothers or mother-in-laws they learned this from. I mean, I'm pretty sure from our grandmothers. And if you think, when our grandmothers, I mean, they were in their parenting journey, if I talk about India, the healthcare system was non-existent, or let's say it wasn't as robust as it is right now. So where did they, learn from? And before you add your thoughts on that, I think that's my personal opinion. I think they learned it from fear, because they had no one to go to. If something happens to the baby, they had no support. They learnt it from fear. Whatever they felt or thought is too risky for the baby, they just eliminated it. I mean, there are multiple examples in India that in a few parts we in a few parts of India, people still offer lentil water as the first food for a baby, whereas a 6 months old baby, if everything is good with them medically, they can also eat boiled lentils and finger food as you introduce them gradually. But I think it's more about fear and risk than any tradition, right? What are your thoughts on this?
yeah. And I think it's similar here too. If you're lucky, oftentimes lucky or unlucky, depending how you look at it and what your relationships are.
Yeah,
It's nice usually to have parents, grandparents, in-laws around right after the baby is
absolutely.
born, and
For
you
the
get
love, for the
support.
love. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And they can help so you can get some sleep and different things like that. But you're right. There's a but to that. If we're relying on them just for the same information to be passed down, which a lot of that is great, and like you said, it's loving information and with all great intentions. However, we live in a different world today. It's different. The information, we have kind of evolved, right? And just to follow information based on, like you said, fear, that's kind of scary. We could be missing out on a whole lot of things,
Yeah,
if it's just based on fear or myths,
yeah, we do, right? I mean, the numbers suggest that the
Yeah.
nutritional levels everywhere around the world are dropping.
And there have been different trends. So, depending on what your age is and what your parents' age are, there's been different trends in history with breastfeeding.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's been more popular, sometimes it's looked down upon, sometimes, in some families it's more of an embarrassing kind of thing. So, depending on when your parents were born or where that information is coming from, can really be different, right? And we can't necessarily directly apply it to our babies today. And
correct.
I think everyone would agree that however we parent, whatever we teach our kids, we want it to be based on up to date, evidence based information for the good of
Absolutely.
everyone.
Absolutely. And of course, and the socio-economic structure of the society has also changed, right? Now, most of us are working parents, both working parents, and there are time constraints. And I mean, also there are better things available now, which I mean, maybe there were some problems in the past. Now, those problems have been solved, and we know what is the right answer to it.
Absolutely. I mean, just like you said, how the times have evolved. There are new things. They're not always new and better, but sometimes they are. So, just the fact of having a source where you can go for trusted information, for up to date, sound information, I think can be a huge piece of filling that gap that we were talking about a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, I think so. One side is this traditional, all the traditions that comes down in the family through our parents, the wisdom that we get through our parents, or the information that we get through our parents. Now, moving on to the latest, the most up to date part, or the support system which a lot of parents are forced to have, is the social media.
Mhm.
What is your opinion about the information that is available right now on social media and all the other platforms there?
Whew. Well,
I know you like it.
you know, I, social media, it's interesting. It can be very helpful. I think it has been great to connect us, right? We are can really there's nothing stopping us from connecting us with the world and across continents, and I love it. However, when it comes to relying on social media for information, particularly about how to raise our kids or feed our kids, I I think we have to have pause. Like I said, there's great information out there, but there's no it's hard to know what information is true, what information is accurate. There are influencers out there. I may, connect really well with an influencer. Someone may catch my eye and I just feel really in line with them, and they're popular and everybody and all my friends are following them. But I don't know, do they have an agenda? Is their information sound? What is their background? Do they have me and my child in
Yeah,
their best interest?
yeah. But
And
they're,
so,
sorry, I'm cutting you off, but they're called influencers for a reason and not educators. They can
exactly, right?
influence you with and there is a whole science behind it. You know, you have to design a video as such to get attention. There has to be a hook, it has to be relatable, it has to be, shareable. So if you consider all this to make a video go viral, I am pretty sure you're leaving out what's right for the parents. You're just
And
making it more likable.
the information that we're talking about, I mean, the reason we're talking about going to these influencers or people on social media is for information about how to raise and feed our babies,
Yeah.
the most precious things, people in
Yeah.
our lives.
Any random
So,
person saying this is it, this is it.
yeah. And there's really no checks, or there's no checks
Yeah.
and balances to that, into that information.
Yeah. For example, there is I mean, almost a war out there when it comes to weaning methods on social media. So I would like to have your opinion once and for all to settle this debate. what is better, baby led weaning or traditional weaning? Or, I mean, what is about weaning and why it is so important and why are people debating about it?
Had good question. So just to answer your question, to define it a little bit, I think of traditional weaning as, what maybe our parents and our grandparents tell us, like what they used to do in terms of um, offering baby cereals and purees first, and kind of going through the first steps that a lot of us are familiar with. So purees first, maybe fruit purees first, and then vegetables, and then it progresses to more solid foods and textured foods, and goes to table foods after that. A newer approach to this is to, and just kind of in brief, is to skip purees
Okay.
and to allow the baby to really start with solids, and to empower the baby more and allow them to hold and feed themselves and mouth these things. And the strict approach of that is that some people don't do purees at all. They don't even do some spoon feeding at
Hmm.
all. And so rather than really getting into the debate of that or choosing a side, I prefer, and then let me add, there's a middle ground too. There's a combined approach where you do a little bit of both.
Yeah, they call it
And
on social media, they're calling it responsive feeding.
responsive feeding. And that's probably where I fall. If I had to choose one method or approach, that's probably where I
Mhm.
fall in general. But really, I really like to just listen to the baby, watch your baby, learn your baby's cues. They tell us a lot. If we just learn to listen to them and be patient, our babies are smart. They intrinsically, know what their bodies need oftentimes, and we have to be the good listeners. And oftentimes that will guide us. And the other reason that I don't really choose one particular approach is, one, I think we're just too complex of a species to follow one approach to anything. But also, I just like to, like in that term, be responsive to the baby. And, what one approach that might work for one child is just not the approach for another child. So I really look at it at a more individualized, specific approach to that particular baby, as well as that particular family and the family dynamics, because that plays into time constraints, access to certain foods, or the ability to puree or to steam foods or whatever. Yeah, rather than getting, and yeah, it becomes, I think, when names become put on certain approaches, it's handy for social media, right?
Yeah,
It's a handy way to sell things or
yeah.
to sell an idea. But I just think it's more complex than that, really.
So I'm glad you mentioned the word selling. Does because that brings me to from influencers to the real marketers, the baby food companies. Because I come from a generation in India when doctors literally prescribed chocolate drinks to kids to be or to feel more energetic.
Mm.
There was a drink called Boost, and I still remember its tagline says, "Boost is the secret of my energy." And it was, a great sportsman doing their ad. And till a few months ago, it was still labeled as a health drink for kids in India. So now everyone is aware that, okay, sugar is bad. But now they have given it a twist that because sugar is bad, we will add natural sugaring ingredients like dates and honey or stuff like that. But what I think, when I think about it, they are still propagating powdered foods. So, a natural ingredient powder to mix in milk for the kids. But the question is, why can't kids have nutrition or real foods from real foods? Why are we still obsessed with giving our kids processed and powdered food? I mean, why do you have to first, turn the food into a powdered form, dry it, pack it, sell it and we pay extra, and then we get the nutrition, and then we say this has all the nutrition. But whereas our kids can't they just eat normal food? Of course. And then it also happens that some parents say, okay, our kids have become, picky eaters, they don't eat fruits. Can this be corrected? One at a later stage, when the kid is 3 or 4, and he or she is already a picky eater. And can it also be avoided at the start when we are introducing foods to a little one? Because if the child learns to eat real foods, I think then as a species or as a new generation, we can defeat this propaganda of giving powdered form of food to our kids.
Yes, I think we can. And I think we need to. And I think we need to get back to some of our older ways before we had all these fancy drinks and things.
Yeah.
Similarly, here in the US, there is a pediatric nutritional drink that is marketed to picky eaters.
Okay.
And,
Powdered form.
pardon me?
Powdered form of food.
Oh, this is an already mixed drink.
Mixed drink. Okay. So
So
packaged
basically, but
drink.
it has lots of sugar in it, and
Mhm.
so it's kind of sold as like it can be a meal replacement, for your picky eater. If they're not eating a variety of foods, then let's just give them this.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, they will gain weight on it because there's a lot of sugar too, and you
Mhm.
can get chocolate and strawberry and different
All the
fun
good
flavors,
things.
right? But I don't think we have to do that. Even if we're struggling with a picky eater, we don't have to go to those things. Now, as a therapist, clinically speaking, there are times when we need to use certain things like that to help, right? Maybe like a band aid for a period of time till we get a child to another level, or while we're working on something, or, after we get some weight gain. But for a typical child that's not having a diagnosable feeding issue, it I struggle with turning to things like that because, like, to what you just said, it's not natural food. It's processed. There's a lot of sugar in it. And then in turn, it can lead to the development of picky eating or more picky eating because the child is not having exposure to the healthy grown foods right from the earth. Oh, and we're not even mentioning yet about sitting at the table as a family
Yeah.
and eating, and the routines that are so important in eating, to all of these things to help prevent picky eating down the road. What you're saying as far as, yeah, I agree. I don't think we need those things. We don't need to rely on those, certainly, and they can contribute to picky eating. So let's try to provide education, fill that gap that we were talking about from the beginning, so parents don't, out of desperation, reach for those things that are being heavily marketed to them, right?
Yeah.
And they're convenient, right? We have the money these days to buy these things. They're marketed to us. The food industry company, the baby food companies spend billions of dollars on marketing.
Absolutely. To play. And that also brings me to our last question, because you mentioned that, yes, I mean, we all agree that we all know that they spend billions in influencing our minds. They really breed on our fears, right? Because I see a lot of companies in India selling their products: increase your baby's weight in 4 months, increase your baby's brain power by doing these activities or by giving them this food, increase your milk supply by having this food. And all that they sell is powdered with sugar or without sugar. It's still powdered and processed, and they are breeding on our fears that, oh, we want our also this notion, Kelly, I would like to really have your thoughts on this, because we mentioned the numbers in US for obesity and for malnutrition and wrong kind of nutrition in India. And in India, if you look at the reports, children as young as 8 years are being diagnosed with the pre-diabetic condition because of having a lot of processed and ultra processed food. So this notion of a healthy baby being, a chubby baby, or having good weight. What is this? Because when I remember, I can share a personal story there. When we took my son to India for the first time, and Arif he is not a chubby baby. He's thin, but he eats well. Touchwood, he's active and everything. I met with the doctor, in our society where we live in our community, and then he was like, he is thin. I said, yeah. So give him this powdered food. 2 spoons of this powdered food is as good as a meal. I said, yeah, but he eats 3 meals. No, 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 no. You need to increase his weight. I said, why do I need to increase his weight? He is active. He's, achieving all the milestones. And he was 2 at that time. But the mindset of increasing the brain power, the weight, I mean, as if our babies are, lacking something since their birth.
It's unfortunate. I mean,
Yeah,
I hate to hear that because and I think, there's probably long back in the history where some of this comes from in terms of,
absolutely. Yeah.
you know, uh money and economic
Yeah.
levels and things
There,
like
there was
that.
a time only the rich could afford the sugar.
Yeah, right? And so some of that is probably trickling down into this mindset. But it's so unfortunate because I can tell you, from being a therapist and in my private practice, I come across kids. Yes, I definitely have kids who are struggling to gain weight and who are quite thin, and they're just not getting all the nutrition that they need. But I also have kids who are actually overweight or are in the obese category, and they're eating 5 foods. So obviously, I mean, everybody knows, I think, that child is not getting the nutrition they need. There are things missing from their diets, right?
Yeah,
But they're overweight. So we have to break that cycle of just assuming that there's some connection with weight and health,
yeah,
right? It's just you can be healthy. I really believe you can be healthy at different weights. We have to take more into account than just the number on the scale. We have to take genetics, we have to take parents. And like you said, your son, he eats 3 meals a day and he's eating healthy foods, he's
yeah,
meeting his developmental milestones, everything is going well, he's developing fine. And it's just unfortunate that when we tie a number to health, we really can instill false, unnecessary stress and fear in
absolutely.
parents. And they also often take it as a direct insult to their parenting skills. Like, oh my
Absolutely.
gosh, I can't even feed my child well. I'm not a good parent because they're at this weight. And we just have to break that thinking. It's
Yeah.
not accurate and
And
it's not healthy for
and
any of
then
us.
that stress also goes to the child somewhere down the
Absolutely.
line. That
Absolutely.
I mean, if they're eating 3 meals, and still the parent is made to believe that he's weak or she's weak, and then the parent is almost forcing the child to eat more, and probably also being influenced at the right time by these powdered food companies, and then they will introduce these powdered foods to the child, which can actually lead to picky eating behavior.
And I can tell you directly, a portion of my private practice who I'm seeing with kids with feeding disorders are a result of that exact scenario. Fear from, lack of weight gain, which leads to force feeding, which leads to stress. It's a stressful, I mean, it's just a vicious cycle of stress, and it is not good for anyone. And even just the fact that we know stress hormones, and especially like with feeding, when people are stressed, when they're being force fed, stress hormones dampen appetite. So there's even physiological changes there that are negatively impacting that child's ability to eat.
Yeah, yeah. I think today more than ever, we need people to, have a voice of reason, to, raise their voice against all these things. And I think it becomes really important for parents also to educate themselves and to uncondition themselves even from their own parenting, that what is good and what is not, what is propaganda and what is marketing, and what is actual facts. So Kelly, we thought we'll have this episode for 20 minutes. I think we are already 34, 35 minutes. 10 minutes over. But what a conversation. Really, really, we covered some nice topics for parents who I think probably really need to know this. Someone from like you, an expert. And thank you. And we meet again for the upcoming episodes in this podcast. And yeah, thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Love to share my passion anytime.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, guys. This was our first episode. I hope all the parents and all the mothers around the world find it helpful, or whatever we spoke about. It relates with you and your parenting journey. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe, because we're using this podcast as a medium to really help parents and mothers out there, and also kids out there who really need help. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please subscribe and see you next week.